Ladies and gentlemen, we now commence with the next session. May I now call upon stage Colonel Ajay Singh to throw some light on his upcoming book, Ukraine, Gaza, Taiwan, A World at War.
The CDS, General Anil Chauhan, the Army Commander, General AK, my old friend and publisher, Rajan Arya, and all the friends out here in the audience, thank you very much for being out here on this day, on an occasion I think is truly momentous in the first edition of Kalam and Kavach. And for me, it is a matter of pride that my book on Ukraine, Gaza, Taiwan, A World at War, could be unveiled at this festival. And since I've been told to say a little bit about A World at War, let me tell you a little bit about what this 21st century, supposedly the century of peace, is all about. You know, when the Second World War ended, the 20th century ended, everyone said 21st century is the century of peace. But in 25 years, 24 to be precise, this century has seen more deaths, civilian casualties, and displacements than 100 years of the past century, less the two world wars. We have had conflict virtually across the globe, all of which has the potential to powder keg into wider conflagrations. And to herald in this new century, we had 9/11 and the US War of Terror, which took 20 years, $3 trillion, 5,000 US servicemen, about 2.5 lakh Afghan civilians who we don't consider because they're only collateral damage. And it ended with the Taliban being replaced by the Taliban. It also ended with the Islamic State moving a little out of Afghanistan and establishing itself in North Africa, where it is right poised to move across the Mediterranean into Europe. And it also set the stage for the rise of China and also the resentment of Russia. Events which have all come together and morphed into, in the event of 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Today, we are on the 711th day of a war that was supposed to last 2 weeks. But actually, I'm wrong in that. Because though this phase of the war began on 24th February 22, the war has been going on for 8 years now. It actually began in April 2014, when Russia took over Crimea. They took over parts of the Donbass, the Luhansk and Donetsk province, and in that area established what is called the LOC, the line of contact. This bout has only come about when when Ukraine decided to join NATO, a decision which would have brought NATO right onto the borders of Russia. And as Putin says, don't these guys see it? If NATO comes here, their missiles will hit Moscow in 3 to 4 minutes. We have nowhere further to go behind this. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no justification for war or violence. But as members of the security establishment, I think the Russian cause for maintaining its security imperatives could be justified. Viewing it in the Indian perspective, it is something akin to having a large external power, read China, putting offensive weapons and missiles in Nepal. An act which cannot really be condoned and would be definitely countered in every way. When the talks to remove NATO did not pay dividends, Russia attacked on the 24th of February. And gentlemen, at that time also, the war would have ended in 2 weeks. I want to tell you a very, very interesting story. You all know that famous 64-kilometer long convoy which came in from Belarus towards Kyiv, and that airborne attack on Hostomel, which I consider to be one of the most brilliant and most audacious actions of this century, military actions of this century. It is not that military incompetence which the Western media make it out to be. No, not at all. Also, when that column moved and halted for 7 days, the headlines were plastered with Russian incompetence and how their tanks ran out of fuel. In one word, gentlemen, that's hogwash. A tank has got 400 liters of capacity. It will move 400 kilometers on a fuel tank in any case. The reason behind this will shock some of us. I was speaking on this at a forum at the Foreign Policy Advisory Group. And in attendance was the Bangladeshi ambassador to Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia at that time. And he given me permission to share the story with you, so it's not in confidence. And I told him about the 7 tanks, the 7 days of halt. And he said, you know what really happened? When that convoy was coming close to Kyiv, it was clear that Kyiv is going to fall. In fact, Kyiv was saved by a whisker. And the foreign ministers of Russia, Ukraine, got together at a resort in Odessa. And he said, since I was the ambassador there, I also went out there because I heard what was happening. And he puts it, he said the Russians and the Ukrainians are like Indian Pakistanis. They made Maro Jhappi, spoke in Punjabi, they spoke in Russian, had chicken tikkas and vodka. And in the 3 days of discussion, it was decided that Russia will abjure all hopes of, all intentions of joining NATO. Russia will withdraw back and it will be a status quo. He said on the 3rd night, the US ambassador dropped in unannounced. And he summoned, that's the word he used, the Ukrainian foreign minister. After that, we don't know what happened. The delegation left, talks failed, and the war resumed. So, gentlemen, there have been wheels within wheels within wheels within wheels to keep the war going. And when Russia did continue the campaign, they have attained tremendous gains. The taking over of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk, 20% of Ukraine's most prosperous territories, 80% of its coastline, in a period from April to end September, is actually quite a military feat. Do not be fooled by the contrary of what the Western media tells you. The only thing that they went wrong was in that timing of that offensive. They launched that offensive in February at the time of the spring thaw, when the ground was slushy, and as an Armored Corps officer I know, the use of mechanized forces was lamentable. They were road-bound, they could not use the open terrain. That's one of the reasons why the war extended as long as it did for the initial gains. But for that, we can attribute it to the Manekshaw factor. In 1971, when Mrs. Gandhi told General Manekshaw to attack East Pakistan in April, he refused. I won't say he refused. He gave sound military reasons why the attack should take place not before 15th of November, because of the ground, weather conditions, passes close, etc. None, she agreed, but none of Putin's generals had the moral fiber or professional integrity to refute that political decision. Something for all of us to take home on. And when the Russians eventually made all those gains, they had a referendum and they have taken over all 4 provinces as part of Russia, Akhand Russia, if you can call it that. Their aims are tremendous. When the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive this year, a spring offensive, which we have been hearing about since January last year, a totally hackneyed, ill-coordinated offensive of 9 brigades of disparate equipment launched along a 400-kilometer front line. That offensive could only break the forward Russian defensive line in one position, a position near Zaporizhia, a place called Tokmok. They broke the forward defensive minefield. They have advanced 11 kilometers in 4 months. And going at this rate, it's going to take them 104 years to recover all the territory that Russia has lost. And the prime reason for not only the fact that the offensive was badly done, was, sir, when they tried to break through those layers of Russian minefields, the Ukrainians had only 21 pieces of mine-breaching equipment, a fatal flaw in their plan which prevented them from breaking through the minefield as much as they did. But since we are in a military audience, there are a few things I would also like to bring out. They innovated beautifully. They used drones equipped with thermal sensors which flew over the minefields at 5 o'clock in the morning, when the ground was hard and cold, but the plastic in the mines was still warm, so they could detect, identify, and remove the mines easily. Perhaps we as the army can learn these kind of lessons from them. But with this offensive fizzling out, where do we see this arena of warfare going? Gentlemen, the Russian, if you read the Russian concept of warfare, they always absorb an offensive and launch an annihilating counteroffensive. They have built up their troops. Ukraine has been abandoned. They have got 45 days of war fighting capacity left without aid, and around March, April or so, in all probability, the Russians could launch their own counteroffensive, which reaches up to the line of the Dnieper River. There are also elections coming up in Ukraine, and Zelensky may well be ousted out for a more favorable leader. Let me put it this way. In other words, the line of the LOC, which was established in 2014, moved 200 kilometers deep by the end of 2022. It could move a further 150 kilometers deep to the line of the Dnieper River in this campaigning season. And ipso facto, that will be the LOC which Europe will have to live in for the next, I would say not few years, a couple of decades or so. And to add to the confusion and the mix, on the 7th October, Hamas had attacked Israel in an attack everyone should have seen but closed their eyes to. And the root cause of this was what? Though they were quiet, it was the very fact that the issue of the Palestinian people who were removed from their own land and the land given to create the state of Israel was denied to them. That two-state solution of Palestine was never implemented, and that festering anger and unrest had been bubbling beneath the surface for decades now. When Hamas attacked on the 7th of October, they killed 1,400 people. They took back 250 or 40 odd prisoners, hostages, and they created mayhem over a period of 3 days. They attacked airfields, they attacked military bases, settlements, music festivals, the works. But the target was not the mayhem, nor was it those 1,500 people they killed. The target was the Israeli retaliation which they knew would come. And when Israel retaliated in that heavy-handed manner in which they have, it took them precisely 20 days to shift from a victim to an aggressor status. Israel launched its Operation Swords of Iron with 3 aims. One is eliminate Hamas. Today, the Hamas leadership is alive and kicking in the Gaza metro. It had it to retrieve our hostages. They have retrieved 60 hostages in a truce. They have killed 3 of them in friendly fire, as they call it, and recovered just 3 through a proper recovery. And to establish a security regime in Gaza. A security regime which actually consists of blowing up buildings near the border to establish a security zone. Is it feasible? No. The Hamas aims were what? to raise awareness of the plight of the Palestinian people, to lift the siege of Gaza, and to revive the two-state solution. Gentlemen, in spite of the massive humanitarian toll, I think Hamas is closer to attaining its military and political aims than Israel is. More so, since the war is now taking on a much wider configuration. Hezbollah has come in the mix. The Shia militia of Iraq and Syria have come into the mix. The Houthis have blocked shipping in the Red Sea. They're firing missiles at Israel. To add to it, attack on Shia mourners killed 100 Shia mourners who were incidentally commemorating the 4th anniversary of General Soleimani, who was the architect of the attacks of USA. Iran launched attacks on Pakistan. Pakistan retaliated. And guess what? The attacks launched by Iran were targeting a group called Jaish al-Adl, a group which was raised and is sponsored by the USA since the 1990s to foment an insurgency in the border province of Iran. So, these are actions to show that proxy war cuts both ways. Will it go out of control? Will the US use this to launch a series of strikes in Iran? What is going to be the security mechanism in Gaza at the end of it all? Will the two-state solution come about? Well, I do not know all that. But one thing I know is the so-called peace process and the reacceptance of Israel in the Arab world, especially with Israel and Saudi, is now in tatters. And its security is weaker than at any point since the pre-1967 era. So, 2022 had got us Ukraine. 2023 has got us the Middle East. When I say got us, I mean colloquially, of course. And 2024 could get us Taiwan, or rather, a confrontation in Taiwan. Will Xi Jinping use the diversions caused by US distractions in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and of course, the presidential election of November to perhaps launch a once-in-a-lifetime moment and take this brief window of opportunity, which they see as between 2024 to 2027, to take Taiwan by military force? In my book, I have created a scenario. The scenario is something along these lines. Already, China has been conducting exercise. I think they have conducted 21 exercises in the past 2 years itself, practicing an invasion of Taiwan. Any of them could convert into the real thing. Let's see a hypothetical scenario. They have an aerial incursion of Taiwanese territories. A Taiwanese and a Chinese pilot play a dangerous game of Eye-Dare. They collide, the ships, both pilots are killed. The Chinese say that it is Taiwanese provocation that did it. And to prove their point, they capture 2 islands, Kinmen and Matsu, legally Taiwanese, but just 3 kilometers from the Chinese mainland. When they capture the island, they hold a referendum. After all, Xi would have learned from our friend Putin. And in that referendum, an amazing 98% people say they want to reunify with the mainland, with China. Using this referendum, they then launch a blockade and perhaps a military invasion of Taiwan, using the assumption that USA would not intervene. Will this scenario happen? Will it not? Will the US intervene? I think that is one of the most pressing questions which none of us have real answers to. But these are 3 major conflicts. Let's face it, I mean, there are minor conflicts going on across the world in our own neighborhood. Pakistan is imploding, but then it's been imploding for the past 20 years. And today, that instability of Pakistan itself is cause of concern to us. It will, not could, it will spill over to our soils. The Taliban taking over Pakistan is a real and actual danger. I have no fears about the Durand line being disintegrated. But will a group use this instability to maybe launch an attack, a terrorist attack on India to divert attention? Worse, will a rogue terrorist group use this instability to launch an attack in India to provoke the attack onto Pakistan, which could tip it across the precipice and make it ripe for the taking? And importantly, would India decide to use this instability to help tip it over the precipice and cut it down to size once and for all? These are options and scenarios which are definitely very much there. And in all this, where does India stand? Ladies and gentlemen, I think I share a sentiment with each one of you when I say we are so proud of the manner in which our government and our foreign minister has held our own in spite of the pressures to join any side. The stance taken, purely dictated by national interest, is what has actually put India in a greater position of power and strength than before. Yes, the world is being divided into blocks, and India is the tipping point. The side we take, the corner with the side we take is going to be emerge victorious in the coming century. And in that, maintaining our strategic autonomy is the most essential thing to ensure nothing but pure, unadulterated national interest. Remember, I think in the morning I mentioned, there are so many powers who are not too happy at India's rise. And for the powers, let's read USA. I read an article which says, in a US magazine, the fears of India-China rapprochement. The fears, mark my words. Because if we two get together, US supremacy might be at stake in this century. On the other hand, if they do provoke a confrontation, they would have a Ukraine all over again. That is one of the lessons of the Ukraine war, and that is one thing which our policy and our policymakers have successfully avoided. Gentlemen, these are just some of the conflicts that are going around the world. I have not even mentioned North Africa, where an amazing 6 million people have died. We don't even hear of it. 20 times in Sudan itself, 20 times the number of deaths of Ukraine. But ladies and gentlemen, they do not impinge us directly as of now. So today, for India as a nation, we have to continue. We are holding our own beautifully. We have been taught one very vital lesson about that future wars, which many of us had written about, 6-day war, short, swift war, restricted time and space. That theory is out of the window. It could be long, protracted conflicts in which being self-reliant, having Atmanirbhar is essential. And more than anything else, what is essential is holding your own without dependence on external aid to ensure your national interests are maintained. Because the environment around us, though it is not really a world war, it is very, very akin to a world at war. And in this, we have to hold our own, of which I have no doubts we would. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. I would request the Army Commander, along with Mr. Rajan Arya, to come up on stage for the book release. Thank you, sir. I would request the Army Commander and Mr. Rajan Arya to felicitate Colonel Ajay Singh with a token of appreciation. Thank you, sirs.